Hey guys, welcome. I'm Vulture Culture, and this is the Korg reissue of the ARP Odyssey. This synthesizer's incredibly already 10 years old, and it itself is a recreation of the original ARP Odyssey, which came out in 1972, which is pretty crazy to think about. That would be the revision 1, and one of the great things about the Korg version is you have 3 different filter revisions here. So we have the filter from the first one. We have the filter from the second revision. And the third revision. Which is a really great feature. We also have drive here. And I used to have a vintage ARP Odyssey. I had it in the studio for a bit, but it had some problems. And so the original owner actually took it back from me, which was super cool of him. So I don't have the original to compare, but I don't really think we need it. This is a stream checking out this synthesizer on its own, checking out what makes this synth what it is. And thinking about it in terms of what's possible to do with it, which is super fun. I do believe the Behringer version has lights. So you can still buy the Behringer version, which came out, I think, in 2019, and you can still buy them for about $600. Or you can buy one of these used for about $550 or so with shipping, which is great, because when we're talking about analog monosynths, I mean, you could spend a lot of money really quick. And one of the fun things about a synth like this is everything is immediate. There's no presets or anything. It's literally what you see is what you get. So what we're hearing in this intro is actually only the ring modulator. So this is what it sounds like on without the ring mod. And I think the ring modulator, just hearing that should awaken the senses to the fact that we're not dealing with a traditional analog monosynth, or at least we can take it into some places that a lot of other monosynths can't go, because it is, as it's been called, the first punk synth because of how crazy it can get. Here's another example of this. Here's just a sawtooth, right? I believe we can feed the sample and hold mixer in here. Well. So you can see that it could get kind of crazy kind of fast. And so the Odyssey, for those of you guys who aren't familiar with ARP, was sort of their slimmed down version of their slimmed down version, the 2600 of the 2500. So much like Moog had these giant modular walls and then condensed it to the mini Moog. That's sort of the same path that that they took to make this synth originally. And having all of the basic modular power here, you can kind of see it's laid out somewhat modularly, but it's got a couple of tricks up its sleeve. So I thought it would be cool. I will turn my microphone up a bit here so that it's a little less crazy. How's that, guys? Is that a little bit better? That way you guys aren't getting your eardrums ripped off. It just can be a very loud synth. So let's take sample and hold off and worry about FM later. Yeah, so the 2600 is going to be more flexible, more that you could do. But what they wanted to do is create an instrument that was very playable very easily. So let's check out just like kind of the basic stuff here. Let's move the mod down here. So over here, there's a couple of little things about this synth that will throw you off. The first is we've got the control for the oscillator shape is over in the audio mixer, which makes no sense to the modern mind, right? It should have been over here, and there's even room for it over here. So we have a sawtooth. And I have to say, it's just a very bright sound to start with. But like a beautiful weight and thickness to it. It's just the type of sawtooth ballads have been written about, because it's everything you want. It reminds me a lot of the Moog Source that I had, in the sense that it's a very balanced, lots of weight, lots of high end, lots of buzz, lots of sizzle. It's taking it all the way up. Go above human hearing. And I can actually just make sure that I'm in tune here for all y'all with perfect pitch. There we go. That's your C there. Just in case anybody was going to lose their mind if it was a little out of tune. Great. Square wave. And kind of like on a lot of vintage synths, you actually you end up with this very kind of, like, to me, that's not a square wave. Can anybody else tell me if they hear clipping? I'm not clipping on my end, but it has like a little bit of an admixture of saw and square. I mean, the synth is hot. I could turn drive off, right? But that's not fun, right? We like the overdrive. Yeah, so to my ear, that's not really a square wave, but that's not necessarily a bad thing either. Yeah, I think it sounds right. I would just double check your setup, Damien. With drive on. I mean, for me, Vision says no clipping on his end, love the overdrive. Yeah, I'm going to leave drive on because, I mean, come on now. Wonderful, juicy. I mean, again, Does it sound exactly like the vintage one? I don't know. I mean, to my recollection, it sounds close. I do remember the vintage one being like ripping, but this can rip. So I don't know. I mean, maybe. I think if anything, that one might have been, it was also a little thwacked, so it could have also been just that synth. Hey Lisa, how are you doing? And we could get into, you know, more of a pretty Moog type leads thing. Put it in revision 2, right? We can get that sort of cat sort of sound, the meow. How's it going, Tripwell? That makes sense, Dub, that if you were thinking of a modular sense, you could select, you know, you could pull different waves from the same oscillator and then plug them in at the mixer level, right? So there is something to it. So, and then we also have the ring mod, which is the difference between both signals. Which sounds pretty close like this, right? And you'll notice this is duophonic, right? So this is one of the tricks about the Odyssey. Right? You can kind of get away with playing some... With the ring mod, it's pretty gross, but... Take it into that punk rock territory, though, by messing with the frequency here. Yo, can I get a scum cheers, by the way, for Swords and Synthesizers who lent me this synthesizer? So if it wasn't for Rob, we wouldn't have this stream tonight. So, can I get a scum cheers in the chat? I appreciate it, you guys. So that ring mod for me is just a thing of beauty. It's what takes this synthesizer into a new territory. And it is mixable. So we can start with our nice little Moogie saw type thing. So that could do like kind of a cool bass thing. And the revision 2, for those of you who aren't super up on the history of Odysseys, is the revision, I believe, where it was basically them cloning the Moog ladder filter. And eventually there was a lawsuit from Moog against ARP saying, hey, you can't, you know, clone our filter. And in turn, it happened to be that Moog had stolen something from ARP and something about the keybed. I don't remember exactly. And so they basically had to mutually not sue each other for that reason, which is a really great example of the history of synthesizers and this early sense of there were lawsuits like between Sequential and Emu and then ARP and Moog, but also a reconciliatory sense of like, hey, we're all in this together, so let's not make it too hard for each other. So they eventually both relented. So part of the terms of that agreement was that they would go to a different filter. So we have all three filters in here. Now, because we're going for this Moogie type thing, the more resonance we crank, right, the more low end we're going to get, just like a regular. Todd, yes, it does. So this is the Moog filter. Oh, I'm glad your shirt showed up, Rob. Awesome. That is a thing, by the way. If you go to vultureculture.live, you can buy a Filthy Scum t-shirt. Show your scum pride, right? We swap it into the original filter. You can hear how aggressive that one is. And then 3, you can hear that the resonance is massive. Now, what I've noticed with the 3 revisions of filters is that revisions 2 and 3 sound similar at equivalent resonance levels, which is not the same level on the fader here. So you can kind of get the same sound from both of them. It's just how much resonance and how quickly do you get there. But for me, there's no doubt in my mind that filter 1 actually sounds the best. Ooh, that's a cool sound. And this is what I would like to highlight about this synthesizer, if you're not super up on it, is this synth, it just takes you places. To me, I would love to sample that and then put it into, it's kind of got like almost an old school drum and bass. Let's move it over to square waves. Like a DJ Hazard sort of bricks don't lie type of sound to it. And I'm not saying you can't do it with the VST. I'm just saying it's really fun to experience the hands-on nature of this. And unlike many other vintage analog mono synths, like the ones I own, there is something about this one where just the way they laid it out does take you in some directions, you know. Triple wants to know, can you make a respace? For sure. That is not particularly brutal to do. We could do it a couple of ways. We could use like the ring mod, right? I appreciate the tip. So all we're listening to right now is the ring mod of 2 square waves. So it's just the difference between the 2. If we listen to just 1, that's what we have. We just have a square wave, not surprising. Both waves, they're tuned to a major third, which happens to be a ratio of 25%. And that is musically useful when you're talking about sums and differences. To get this incredibly just rancorous. So now, by adding resonance, so that's that really kind of, I guess I would say like kind of throaty. I don't know if I call that quite a Reese. It's actually very good for, again, dubstep and drum and bass type music. without a doubt, just this current layout, and one of the beautiful things about an Odyssey or most analog monosynths that don't have any sort of digital presets or anything, is if you want this sound, like let's say you have one of the VST versions of the synthesizer, just set the faders, just take a screenshot. Oh, my cat is losing her mind over there. Just take a screenshot and move the faders to the same places on your synthesizer and it'll be the exact same sound. So that's a really high resonance. Not too much. And Reznor actually used this synthesizer, not this one in particular, I think a vintage one, for the song Bite the Hand That Feeds. The lead in the middle was actually an Odyssey. I'm glad you mentioned that. God, that's such a great, that's like perfect. This is all you need for just on the edge of self-oscillation. Great sound. Resonance down. The envelope amount down. That's also like such a great drum and bass sort of sound, you know? I'm immediately feeling that sort of energy from this synth where you could kind of get into those types of things. You hear that type of sound time and time again in that genre. So to me, yeah, immediately kind of takes us there. What are some other things we could do with this synth? So let's turn resonance all the way down. Now we're just listening to square waves, right? And what we have is pulse width, so. It does have more harmonics than a square wave, though. A little bit of both. So pulse and square at the same time. Oh, I didn't see. Yo, how's it going, Carl? I mean, there's just such a charisma to this synthesizer. Again, comparing it to the original, not as interesting to me today as just exploring the synth for what it is and saying, hey, you know, this fucking thing is highly useful for any sort of sound. So let's add some pulse width modulation. So LFO goes very fast. And there's something about the way the waves come together and clash and have so much gain going through the filter and everything. I mean, I guess we could turn gain off, you know. I will never use this synth with drive off. Let's just forget about that. It's so much more present with that. And the way that it clashes is beautiful. And we still have control, so if we want to push this further... is your sort of alternative way to get to a Reese. Can I get a scum cheers in the chat? It just occurred to me in this very moment that usually when I'm demoing a synth like this, I would have some delays on or some reverb. And I totally forgot because it is so satisfying of a sound on its own. So what's maybe interesting to somebody out there is playing around with this synth, because I had a Mark III, an ARP Odyssey Mark III, which looks like this with the orange font and everything. And I think it's the most beautiful version of the synthesizer to me. The previous revision kind of had this white, creamy white, hashtag creamy white faceplate. It's the Moog revision, and then the original has more of a duller brown 70s look. But checking out these different filter types, tones only a vulture mother could love. The revision 1 is so superior to my ears because I love a really bassy filter sound. Some people love ladder filters. That's okay. I accept you. It's fine. You're welcome. But there's something about the viciousness and the brutality of that first revision. I actually put in an offer on Reverb for one of the vintage Rev 1s, which I never would have bought just because I think the Rev 3 looks prettier. And I'm superficial like that. All right, so let's bring it up. This is our transpose switch. We're going to turn the ADSR to the filter off. And we're going to turn the ADSR to the oscillators on, I think. So what you're hearing there is oscillator 2 is being modulated by ADSR. So what's nice, also, by the way, I should have explained this. We have two envelopes here. So unlike some monosynths where we only have one envelope, right? We have two, but one of them's only attack and release. And unlike even on a mini Moog where you have attack, sustain, release, this is just sustain all the way up, attack and release is it. But for a lot of sounds, that's really kind of it's kind of like a bare minimum there. And so we can use the ADSR for more complex stuff, like in this case, the pitch here. It turns sync on. And what you'll notice is suddenly the synthesizer is in tune again. And that's because hard sync, as most of you know, is going to force one of the oscillators to slave to the other one. So basically, every time this oscillator triggers, it starts this one over. So we get a different timbral shift or tonal shift or brightness shift. So we're getting that sort of and just like everything else with the synth, you can take it a little bit further than you probably should. So this can kind of get you into that like Daft Punky sort of territory. I'm not a, they use like MS-20s and 303s through the distortion pedals. But you can hear. Yeah, so that's a beautiful thing, right? I don't think it really requires much more. Of course, we could do vibrato, say with the LFO to oscillator 1. Which will, in turn, this is an interesting way to add vibrato because VCO2 is slave to 1, it's adding vibrato to both effectively. And you can get with the LFO pushed this kind of characteristic sound that doesn't sound good on all synths, but on this one, again, because of the way the waves crash into each other and create distorted interference. Just a hell of a sound. So then I think I showed earlier we have sample and hold. Can you ring mod and hard sync only oscillator 2? So let's turn oscillator 1 off. And add ring mod. So in this case, a ring mod, probably because of the slavery going on. It sounds about the same, maybe brighter. Yeah, it is brighter. That is a vicious sounding. So, unlike my experience with Moog synths and even the Roland monos and even something like a really legendary synth like the Monopoly, this synth just rips. I mean, that could really be the title of this stream, is just this synth rips. That's really maybe the takeaway. These are the mini keys, Anarcho. Dorian, welcome. Yeah, they definitely would have. And I mean, comparing it to say something like the Moog Source, which New Order used on Blue Monday, which I used to have, you know, the difference tonally in like how far this synth will go is pretty crazy. Yeah, it is very close. So, a little craziness. So yeah, no, I could see. Let's go back, and I kind of want to set this up just to be kind of basic. So let's go to Sawtooths. That needs to change. There we go. Okay, so this is fun. Let's go and check out something I set up beforehand. We actually have a bunch of Odysseys here. So I've got the Korg Odyssey plugin on the lower right here, and I've got the GeForce Access, which is their version of the Odyssey, up here. And I just wanted to do just a filter sweep. So, of course, the Korg plugin also has the 3 different types. I'm not sure if the GeForce one does. And I haven't tried this ahead of time. So, you know, I want to be on good terms with Korg and GeForce. I think they're awesome plugin manufacturers. But we're going to just have a little discussion or experiment about what I would call filter sweetness. So for the hell of it, let's start with the ARP Odyssey, right? And all I'm really going to do is try to match the 2 sounds real quick here. Just sawtooths. So first thing I need to do is add a little attack and release here. What am I doing? VCA amount. Oh, here we go. I need to move it over. It's pretty close, right? Like that's that. So you're hearing the Korg hardware, software, hardware, software. Dekarmic, you absolutely can. I'm just not interested in it because I have other synths that can do non-piercing sounds. We can check that out later, though. I just want to do this filter sweep comparison. Dub. So, as far as the sawtooth sound, I mean, without any sort of filter going on, let's do a filter sweep. And I'm not that interested in breaking this down too far, so I'm going to increase the resonance to the point of almost self-oscillation. Let's see how close that gets. It sounds like the plugin goes further. It's actually hotter than the actual hardware. With my resonance on the hardware almost maxed out, like on the verge. That's like 50% on the software. The hardware. I gotta drop the octave. Oh, interesting. So immediately you can hear a difference in the fundamental, right? So hardware. Software. No, using the mouse is not as fun. I think it actually, I think it handles the low end better. I think it is very good on the low end. As you go higher up, it starts to not sound as close. More of a little bit of a faker distortion, almost like it's running through a distortion pedal sound to the plugin version. So that's the Korg plugin. Let's swap over to the GeForce plugin and kind of see the same thing, just kind of roughly where we're at here. And I need to unmute that. So first off, we need to select the VCOs, because that sounds like a square wave to me. And I should have familiarized myself with that. I didn't even consider it. Oh, I see. Oh, you know what? That's interesting. Here, it seems kind of, this is based off of the axe. So we actually have a sawtooth and a square wave, but not both at the same time, because the ARP axe was a single oscillator synth with you could put that sub in. So let's just do saw and square, and then over here I'll just bring saw and square so we have something kind of similar, right? So seems like I gotta tune these. And is there independent control over this? I don't think so. I think because it is like the hardware. So we'll have to do this with just sawtooth waves. we go. So now we have 2 volume match sawtooth waves. So we'll be doing this filter sweep with just sawtooth waves near the point of self-resonance. Just a beautiful sound, right? Over on the plugin, let's take the filter to almost self-resonance. We could do this also with an envelope, right? So that we could kind of set ourselves a little smoother action. So incredibly less bass, but I think the reason is because as the paint job would give away, the axe is based off of this 3rd filter revision. So to be fair, let's go over to revision 3 and do the comparison. And again, this is for fun. I'm not trying to like pick apart any of these companies, but oh, we gotta turn the resonance now because it's ripping. So definitely close, but the biggest difference is on the axe. It's just a lot less low end. You basically have the same sort of ladder filtery characteristic as you crank the resonance on both the plugin. It's weird. The character feels a little closer on the GeForce plugin, but the actual, like the fundamental feels missing on the low end. For all I know, that's what an actual ARP axe would sound like. And this is, kind of like a silly exercise because of that. On the other hand, it could just be that that's the way the plugin is, and it gets the character really close. I'd say a little closer than the Korg version, but you do lose the fundamental, which I suppose you could make up with like a sub oscillator and shit, right? Yeah, it's just more ladder filtery. I'm curious, what about the second? Very close. Is the ADSR affecting the amplifier? Yes, it is. I see. I would have to have the volume all the way up, so that might be part of it too. But you just don't get the same weight that you get from the hardware. it's very much based off of, I wanted to just do this quick little filter sweep comparison. Maybe it's of use to somebody somewhere out there, comparing the software versions. And I think there's a few other versions. I wouldn't be surprised if Cherry Audio has one. And I know I'm forgetting some other ones out there. But the idea being like, hey, how does the software compare? And in my opinion, the hardware does sound the best of the three. With that, you know what? I just thought about it. I am not using the right plugin because the GeForce Access is based off the Axe, but they make Oddity, which is an Odyssey plugin. I just didn't use it for this, so my apologies, GeForce. This is just for fun to see, how close we can get with software. And I would say, as far as just being interested in getting the sound, I think the software is pretty damn close. As far as what sounds best and what sounds, I do think that the hardware version is good. Now, it would be funny to me if we kicked on an actual vintage Odyssey and it didn't sound quite as ballsy as this. That'd be a really interesting place to be as a vintage synth snob. Can I get some scum snobs in the chat to say, hey, maybe this version has the badassery. There's just something about that sound that's so good. So what are some other types of sounds we'd like to hear? So this is sort of like a brassier single oscillator brass. And I love any synthesizer that gives you a mixer, right? Because it's not obvious, but sometimes having control over how much you want and setting interesting values that are not 100% on or 50% on, something like that. So I believe I'm a couple of octaves up now. Really able to create some pretty cool bassy type stuff. So if we put the filter down here, Rob, I really appreciate you gifting 5 memberships. So the way this works is YouTube has an algorithm that assigns them randomly. So Rob is kind enough to gift 5, and then in a second, I think in the chat, it'll say who got them. So Mauricio, Todd, Twin Cities, Byron, and Kiki Fries. Welcome to the cult. Yeah, there's a lot of high-pitched shit here. Let's just see for fun how tight this can get. So that's, of course, your typical just like gate opening and closing. Pretty good. So there is something to an all analog synthesizer as opposed to one that has digital envelopes where you can get these really thwacky. Wow. Put some delay on that in your instant Berlin school. Yeah, very beautiful. Then, other way, right? We want to go beautiful. Let's go square waves, increase pulse width modulation all the way. It is amazing how bright it gets. Three, kind of warmer. Down, attack. Create something that sounds like a church organ filled with lots of bats. So I always struggle with like a churchy type sound with no reverb and no chords really, you know. So One thing I want to do quick, I see drone, so I'll go for that one, aquatic, next. Yeah, this definitely deserves some samples. Let's add some ADSR modulation. Wow. So what I'm trying to do is create like a kick drum here. I'm glad you enjoy it, Lonnie. So this is kind of how you can make like a kick drum. We actually don't even need as much frequency modulation, which is crazy because most of the time on synths, you don't get enough. So this is sort of like your 808 and like how techno-y you want it is where this filter cutoff is. I want to say the original 808 was somewhere around like a G. So we could sample that, right? That would be our kick drum if we want it to be a little more techno. We could, right? Now, let's do another type of sound. Let's do a snare. Something like that, right? We're only use one oscillator now, but we're going to use noise. We have pink and white noise. For this, I'm going to use white. And what's interesting is because there's so much drive, as you play with them, it sort of pushes one signal out of the way of the other. Little differences in decay. Almost like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a steel drummy sort of sound? Ooh, I like the first one because it's a 2-pole filter. So you get more of that noise through, right? That was like my Miami coming out a little bit on that one. Okay, so drone. So there's some things we could do to achieve that. Let's say one of them would be, let's go back to just a regular. We don't need any. We'll start with just one oscillator, right? We'll start with the square wave. And I'll start with the sawtooth wave, sorry. The reason is because I eventually want to use pulse width mod, but I want to use sample and hold first. On the filter, so we're going to select sample and hold and route that to the filter. So what I'm trying to do is sort of figure out where I like that, but we're going to use output lag. Now it's sliding between those values, right? So then we can slow that down. So we're going to have a really evolving sort of filter sound. And we actually could use VCA gain. So what VCA gain does is it just turns it into a drone synth. We have a high pass filter, by the way. VCA gain only affects like the one note. I can't stick to. All the way out of audio rate. So what we could also use is the ADSR because it's loopable. If you've some true scum here will know what dysnomia is. It's an old choose your own adventure I wrote, and all the way back then there was a sound in the soundtrack that kind of sounds like this. All right, I think that is a as good of a place as any to call it for the night. I think that if you aren't excited by that, I don't know, I can't arouse you. I have no tricks left up my sleeve to give you guys that sense that this is a synthesizer at least worth your attention. I totally understand being, I fall in love with every synthesizer I have on this stream, and obviously no one should own as many synthesizers as I do, and I can't just, you can't buy every synth that sounds cool. And there are other synths that sound like this and can do things like this, synths with ring mod and sample and hold and things like that. I have to say, I'm very impressed by this. And being a vintage synth snob, this is the weirdly the coolest piece of modern hardware that I've experienced. Things like the Prophet 12 and Modulus and all of that, they're cool, but they're, in a way, they compare to the vintage poly stuff. And of course, this is very derivative of the vintage Duophonic monos from 1972, right? But those synths can be pretty expensive, and something like this at a street price of about $575, I think is what I saw on Reverb for one of these guys. That's including shipping. When I think about how much money I've spent, all three of these mono synths are at least $1,500 and up, right? And this one, for a third that price, and it's got MIDI. You don't have to worry about any of that, what is it really missing? I'd say the only thing it's missing is more voices, right? And you're really not going to get into like polyphonic ARP territory until you buy one of these bad boys, an ARP Fender Chroma Polaris. it's an ARP Chroma, but got bought out. They slapped the name Fender on it. But it was designed by Paul DeRocco from ARP and has a ring modulator, right? So it's now we can kind of go into that territory. I love polysynths because I find it inspiring to be able to figure out chords, and then that's like kind of a song, and then I work from there. But the truth is, most of the time when you're making electronic music, especially the aggressive stuff, bass and leads, so monophonic, not polyphonic. Polyphonic's really good for pads. And maybe if you have like a keys poly part in a song, but yeah, a lot of times you can get away with mono. And in that case, this trance, maybe not so much. The synth doesn't feel like trance. It really speaks to drum and bass and like old school dubstep sorts of vibes. I could see this being the perfect synth for that. Industrial, of course. New wave, punk, synth punk music. Yeah. I think the Behringer is good too. Someone pointed out it has the LED lights on it, so that's fun. How a synth looks is important. That's why the Elvira test is part of the legendary synth test, right? But what I will say is you could buy the Behringer for 600 new, or you could get a used Korg ARP Odyssey for a little less than that. And I do like supporting, even though at this point, I mean, Korg bought the rights to ARP. So it's their right to put it out. I think it sounds very good. I did have a vintage Odyssey in the studio. For some of you guys who might have not been here in the beginning, I had one, and there were some issues with it, and the owner took it back, was very gracious, and took it back from me, which was super cool. So I can't do, Prodigy type music for sure, Paul. This is Visions. This is a hardcore sounds. It's kind of like what DeCarmick was saying. Can it do pretty? I mean, if you put enough reverb on something, it can sound pretty. But this is about being clangorous and loud and aggressive. And honestly, I mean, even compared to like an MS-20, which often gets considered to be, that like ripping filter. The filter on the MS-20 is very calm. It's not fully self-oscillating. So this is maybe the most aggressive synth I can think of in terms of sound. The Polyvox is of course aggressive too and has a fully self-oscillating filter, but it's more like it's got that filter character, but it's not necessarily set up. It doesn't have anything ring moddy or something like that. The way it just doesn't feel like this thing feels like it's overdriven all the time. Maybe that's because I had the overdrive on the whole time. Angel Spit asks, so you like it over the MS-20? If I had to only own an MS-20 or an Odyssey, I think I'm an Odyssey man, like a vintage. And, they're similar prices. But it's hard to say. There's no doubt in my mind that the MS-20 is more flexible, can do more. Can't do pulse width modulation. And mine famously has some dirty jacks. So every time I try to bust this out on a live stream, I try to patch something and it gets fucked up. So some of my frustration with the MS-20 is just that, I've got these dirty jacks. I've had it cleaned twice and it still gives me issues. So if you have like a modern one, like the MS-20 reissue is easily the only, like, I will recommend that. A, you can interface it with Eurorack, but B, it's just like, I'm so frustrated by having dirty jacks, hashtag dirty jacks, that I'd rather just, so that probably taints my opinion a bit. But, yeah. Now, the 2600 should have a similar sound to the Odyssey, but just like the Odyssey, it had different revisions. And those revisions had different filters that have different sorts of colors. So all of them are a little bit different. For me, Synthsonic says, best compliment, totally unique sound, right? And I'm in that camp. So there's, I would say, generally two types of synthesizer people out there. There's people who are looking for one synth to rule them all, and people who want a synth that sounds really unique, that doesn't sound like anything else. And the Odyssey is squarely over here. There are some synths in the middle. I would say the Fender Chroma Polaris is kind of in the middle, where it can do a lot, but it also has its own sound. And then you've also got synths, like a lot of the more modern synths, that are very balanced, very polite, and can kind of do everything, right? So, yeah. We are live, Mixmaster, sorry. Spiritual Anarchist is compared to the Akai AX80. Now, I've never had my hands on an AX80. My friend John from Waveform Mountain has one, and it's very good. I have an AX60, and the AX60 is just all about ridiculous filter FM. For those of you who don't know, the resonance is boosted way more than it should have been on that synth, and that in combination with the filter FM allows that synth to go like it was a mistake. They didn't mean to boost the resonance that much, and it's just ridiculous, and that's what makes that good. But I don't know that I would say that it's as. The thing is like the core of the AX60 is going to be the same chip developed for the sequential 6-track. So it's a medium bassy, not exactly high mid focus. Like the Odyssey is ripping in a way the AX60 isn't. Now the 80 different, but you could maybe lump it into that. It also is known for its ripping resonance. I don't know why Akai was like really cracked out over resonance, but they were back then. Yeah, the Korg 2600M. Yeah, they Anthony Marianelli has a good video comparing his vintage 2600 to the Korg one, and they don't sound identical, but I do think it sounds good. Ingolf, hey, how's it going? Both the Behringer Odyssey and the 2600. Odyssey is the best Behringer monosynth. What did you think about the Korg 2600 to the Behringer 2600? I'd be very interested. Private Pile says the Quiet 5000 also the loudest synth you've ever heard. That's funny. I set my levels and stuff, so I'm not really necessarily like stuck with the same volume. So I had a Kawai K5000S and I didn't really notice that it was loud, but I probably just like turned the volume down at the mixer stage. 40 Thieves asks, how does it stand up to the SH2? I would say that for being so goddamn similar, it's just so different, because the SH2 kind of has like a very similar thing with like an audio mixer. You've got a sub oscillator there, but you just don't have anything like ring mod or cross mod even. I don't think you have cross mod. You don't really have anything that's going to take it into that nasty territory. What you're going to get out of the SH2 is just a gorgeous sounding monosynth with a wilderness to it. I would say that the SH2 is the perfect mini mode. Like if you like a mini mode sort of sound, I would go SH2 over the mini mode. I chose it over my Source. I did do a live stream comparing the Source and the SH2. Highly recommend that to anybody who's into that kind of corner of the analog monosynth market. The filter sweeps on them were virtually identical. And so for me, the SH2, just with pulse width modulation, probably just came down to that. Just has this beautiful sound. It gave me everything I wanted from the Moog Source. And it had the hands-on control, I think was part of it too. So yeah. I think the SH2 is very, very good and very underrated. Anarcha says the X80 screams. Yeah, has velocity, which the X60 doesn't. Yeah, I love the look of the AX80. It was also designed by the first. So I'm blanking on his name right now, but the guy who designed the very first synthesizer in Japan, ahead of Roland and Yamaha, is the designer of the AX80. I believe it's the last synth he ever worked on. I think his first synth was like a Blue Hills something was the name of the synth, either the name of the company or the name of the synth, and it came out right before Roland, which is super interesting. Todd says I only have experience with the emulation. It really is good. I wish that Roland had ever put out a polyphonic version of the SH2, and I got a Jupiter 4 for that reason. I was like, oh, I love the SH2. I want to get that sound polyphonically. And the Jupiter 4, only one oscillator per voice, and didn't quite sound like the SH2, which, I probably got an IR 3109 Jupiter 4, the earliest Jupiter 4s have the same filter from the Roland modular stuff, which the SH2 does. I forget the filter chip number, but the point there being that might also have been part of it, that there was a little bit of a different filter sound to the SH2, the Moog modular, and the earliest Jupiter 4s. And to me, the Jupiter 4 just didn't have the magic that I like from the SH2. I'm sure it's for somebody, Mixmaster asks, not modular or semi, but what do you think of the Korg Multipoly? I think the Korg Multipoly is a great synth. I think it's affordable. I think it's very hands-on. I think it's, of Korg's recent digital synths, it's that and Op6, I think, are the only two where the interface seems like you've only got so much real estate for knobs, right? So you gotta kind of keep the features constrained. I guess King Korg Neo, but who cares about that one? It's all about the multi-poly and Op6 as far as the knobs and faders being enough knobs and faders, but not too many, and not too many parameters that you don't have enough, like on Mod Wave and Wave State. I love Wave State too, but yeah, that would be my opinion there. Very cool. That's crazy that JMJ is using a BARP 2600. GSE7, yeah, that's another one. CS70M, yep. I am a fan. It's it's an incredible synth, but I would caution anybody. It's gorgeous, but for what they sell for is ridiculous. At least with the Matrix 12, with what they sell for, you shouldn't spend that much. But like, if you could get a good deal on one, you can make the argument. It's a very fully featured synth. This synth can't really do vibrato. It's crazy, So yeah, learning curve for Wave States a lot. I do sometimes think about getting the Wave State SE because I just am such a fan of the original Wave Station, which I have right there. But there's only so many synths. So I think with that, guys, it is a good time to call it. Underwhelmed by the Messenger, as many were. I think it's a cool synth, but it is a lot like the Bass Station 2. So there's some argument to just get a Bass Station 2, but I don't know. Bass compensation's nice. If you use the sequencer, I think Messenger makes sense, right? Because it's got stuff like more generative stuff, randomization and things like that you're not going to get on a Bass Station 2. Otherwise, most of the features exist elsewhere. Yeah, I had a great time, you guys. Oh, he's using a Hydra synth. I hope one day to get a Hydra synth in the studio. I just think highly of that synth. Some people say the sound isn't all the way there, which I would be very interested to check out, because I do think the viewers of this channel have the best ears on YouTube. Like, y'all have trained me to pick up on things that I did not hear 5 years ago. And I've been making money as a mixing and mastering engineer for a while now, but just certain things I wasn't cognizant of. Now, I think we've all sort of trained each other through this channel to really pick up on some stuff. So I'd love to get a Hydra synth at some point if anybody wants to reach out to ASM for me. The guy from Cymatics spent $175,000 on synths. That's wild. Yeah, Spiritual, he's got wave folding. Sorry. It's kind of the same thing. Yeah, I think the Hydra is definitely one of the coolest synths. It's hard to argue with in terms of, like, if you can afford it, which nowadays, like, even with the upgraded price of $2,000 for the deluxe, they still seem pretty reasonable for what they are. They just seem overpowered, right? So anyways, guys, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'm very excited for next week. It's going to be a fun one. Got a little something y'all weren't expecting. And continue to be excellent. I'll see you there.